Hello dear viewers, a very warm welcome to our channel. It's very good to have you here. In this video, we are going to have a look at all you need to know about cylinder compression test. A cylinder compression test is one of the most fundamental and critical diagnostic procedure for understanding an engine health. It tells you about the sealing capacity of the combustion chamber. So, the compression test measures the pressure in pound per square inch or in bar that each cylinder can build during its compression stroke. It directly assesses the health of the sealing ring of the combustion chamber. So it tells you how well the mechanical parts are working together in order to create pressure, create compression, and then keep that compression. It will tell you how well the piston rings are sealing. Piston rings are there to seal the piston to the cylinder wall. And it will tell you about the cylinder head valves, intake and exhaust. They have to seal the combustion chamber and they have to allow fresh air into the cylinder. So it will tell us how well valves are sealing. It will also tell us how well the cylinder head gasket is sealing. So we will check piston ring, cylinder head, and head gasket. Good compression reading indicates that these components are sealing properly. Low reading indicates leak in one or more of these areas. When do you perform a cylinder compression test? Well, you should be performing a cylinder compression test if you experience misfire, for example. If your engine has error codes like P0300, P0301, which are misfire related error codes. If you experience loss of power, if the engine feels sluggish and lacks acceleration, if there is excessive oil consumption, if burning blue smoke is coming out of the exhaust, if you have poor fuel economy, a sudden drop in mile per gallon, if you face hard starting problem, if the engine cranks but doesn't really start readily, then that is time for compression test. Or if you experience unusual noise, it could be ticking noise from the top, which indicates problem with the valves, or knocking from the bottom, which indicates problem with the piston rings and crankshaft related problems. Now, there are two methods. There is a dry compression test and there is a wet compression test. Always start with a dry compression test. The dry compression test is where you don't apply any oil into the cylinder and simply measure the compression. In order to do the compression test, disable the ignition system, pull the fuel pump fuse or relay, also disable the ignition system by unplugging the ignition coil or primary wiring, and this will help you prevent the engine from starting and protect the ignition system as well. Remove all spark plugs. This allows the engine to spin freely with no restriction. Block the throttle plate. Fully open it. Hold the throttle blade wide open. This will allow the engine to draw a full charge of air for an accurate test result. And go ahead with the testing. Screw the compression tester firmly into the first cylinder. Then have someone crank the engine. If you have a remote start switch, you can do it. Then crank and do the cranking for about 5 to 7 seconds or until the gauge needle stops climbing. You should hear 4 or 6 compression pulses on the gauge. See, when doing a compression, the needle of the compression gauge will jump. Every time you have compression, it will jump. And when you reach the maximum compression, then it will stop jumping. Note the highest reading on the gauge and write it down. Go ahead and release the pressure from the tester and move on to the next cylinder. Repeat the test for all the cylinders. This is a dry compression test. Now, in order to make it wet compression, there are some things that you need to do. The wet compression test will help you diagnose the cause of low reading found in the dry test. Identify the problem with the help of engine oil. First, identify the engine with the low compression. Then add oil into that cylinder. Squirt about a tablespoon of clean engine oil into the low cylinder through the spark plug hole. Then reinstall the compression tester and crank the engine again. Record the reading. Now, once the reading is recorded, go ahead to interpreting the result. The goal here is to analyze 3 things: the actual compression developed inside the cylinder, the consistency across cylinders, and the change from dry to wet. A healthy engine typically will have 125 to 175 psi for a modern gasoline engine. You should always check your vehicle service manual for exact specification. The rule of thumb is the minimum pressure for an engine to run reasonably well is around 100 psi. Then we have the consistency rule, the most important part. Even more important than the exact pressure value, the exact psi, the variation between cylinders is more important. A healthy engine will have readings that are within 10% of each other. For example, if your highest cylinder is 150 psi, then the lowest should not be less than 135 psi. Make sure the engine is running consistent. Also, don't forget to analyze the dry versus wet test result. If you have good, consistent dry reading, this means the engine is sealing nicely. It is a healthy engine. There is no problem. If the engine is not running normally, the problem is not with the compression. It could be spark related, or it could be timing related, or it could be fuel related. It is not mechanical related. But if you have low and consistent dry reading, this indicates general wear across all the cylinders. It could indicate worn piston ring. Common high mileage engines, they will have this type of reading, low but consistent dry compression test result. What if you have one low dry reading? This indicates a leak in that specific cylinder. It could be caused by burnet valve, or it could be caused by stuck piston ring, or it could be caused by head gasket leak. Whatever the case, if there is low reading in one of the cylinder, it is problematic. If you have low dry reading but wet reading is much higher, for example, if there is a difference of 40 psi, this is because the oil has temporarily helped seal the piston ring. Worn piston rings or cylinder walls are there in that particular engine. Because when oil is added, when it is made wet test, when oil is added, oil will seal the gap between the piston ring and cylinder walls, improving the compression result. If you have low dry test result and wet reading stays about the same, this indicates the oil did not help the seal. The leak is elsewhere. It could be burned or leaking valve. It could be a blown head gasket. So whatever it is, leakage is not into the cylinder, rather it is up towards the cylinder head. And finally, if two adjacent cylinders are with low cylinder dry reading, that indicates leak between the two cylinders. It could be blown head gasket between the two cylinders. This is the most probable cause. If there is a blown head gasket between two neighboring cylinders, those two cylinders will have low reading. Now, what are some of the common symptoms of this type of problem? Compression related problems. If you have, for example, engine misfire plus low compression in one cylinder, that indicate burnet valve, broken ring, or head gasket fail. If you have a white smoke from exhaust and low compression in two adjacent cylinders, that indicates blown head gasket between the cylinders, allowing coolant to leak. If you have excessive oil consumptions with blue smoke and low but even compression, that indicates a general ring and cylinder wear across all the cylinders. That is basically an indication of a high mileage engine. If you notice hissing noise from the oil filler cap or a dipstick during the test, this indicates excessive blowby from worn piston rings, and this is indication of excessive wear as well. Now, there are some limitations to the compression test. The compression test is excellent, but it is not the whole story. It won't detect, for example, a leaking head gasket or water or oil passage. It doesn't detect precise camshaft timing related problems. And some very specific valve train problems like a slightly bent valve cannot be checked by cylinder compression test. For these issues, leak down test or a leakage test is to be done in order to exactly pinpoint what is causing the problem. This leak down test requires more advanced step. It will pressurize the cylinder at top dead center and measure percentage of air leakage, helping you pinpoint exactly where the leak is coming from. It could be from the intake valve, exhaust valve, piston rings, or head gasket. So the cylinder leakage test will pinpoint. Compression test is vital check for your engine bottom end and top end. Consistency between cylinders is more critical than the maximum PSI value. The weight test is the key to diagnosing whether the problem is with the piston rings or the valves or the head gasket. It is a relatively simple and inexpensive test that can save you from costly misdiagnosis and repairs. Well, dear viewers, that is all we have for you regarding some of the things that you need to know regarding the compression test. If you like this video and if you enjoy what has been presented, please do smash the like button. If you are new to this channel, do consider subscribing, turn on notifications so that you will be the first to get notified whenever we come up with another video. Until then, stay safe.